just a couple of minutes to check out your computer. It doesn't scan your computer. This is important because some people may be a little skittish about whether or not somebody can see what's in their computer. It doesn't actually scan it. It's just simply looking for this malware. It'll let you know if you need to fix it, and then you can do so pretty quickly. John?
Nice to have some helpful advice. Harris Faulkner, thanks.
Well, a middle school principal in Texas is facing up to 20 years in prison, 20 years, for allegedly planting a camera in a high school locker room. Now, prosecutors say Wendy Long wanted to see how her daughter's new coach talked to the team after the girls complained the coach simply was yelling too much. Police arrested her earlier this week on charges of improper photography and wiretapping. The question here, did she indeed go too far? Let's bring in our legal panel, former prosecutor Dan Schorr and criminal defense attorney John Manuelin. So, Dan, did she go too far?
She absolutely went too far. She won't really get 20 years. She probably won't get any jail time at all, but she has to be held accountable. She planted a camera inside a girl's locker room. That definitely violates the improper photography statute, if not the other higher crime. And remember, what if this was a male principal who did this all and tried to spy on girls in a locker room and said it was to check out the coach? You have to draw a line. This wasn't at a public place. It wasn't at a park. It was in a girl's locker room, and you have to say that this can't happen.
You know, John, we were asking some questions about the locker room after a conversation in our editorial meeting, because in some schools, a locker room is where people change. In other schools, sometimes that locker room is just a meeting place where you gather and you have your halftime talk or whatever it is. Does that detail matter here, or is that a moot point?
No, it absolutely matters, Jenna, because there's an expectation of privacy that is required under the statute in which Ms. Long is being charged. If there is no expectation of privacy, then it's going to be an absolute defense in the case. And if there was none, then it may, if there was an expectation, she's going to be in trouble. But again, I don't think she's going to do 20 years in prison. I think this is a quite draconian law, if you ask me. I think that there was no pernicious intent. She was checking to see whether or not her daughter was being mistreated or misabused. So I think at the best case scenario, this should be a civil lawsuit and not a criminal one.
Interesting. John, well, that's what John just said. He makes some really interesting points, Dan. We've all seen the footage of Bobby Knight, right? Throwing the chairs at the I mean, that was very public display, but some coaches really take it too far. This was a high school basketball team, if I have that correct. And you know, they were complaining that they were being abused by the coach and no one was seeing it. So if you're a concerned parent, she took it a couple steps maybe too far in some folks' opinion, but you know, what are you to do?
It's a legitimate concern. I've been a basketball coach, and some coaches go too far, but there are legitimate other ways to go about trying to solve the problem. You could report it, you could talk to authorities, you could do a school investigation, but you can't put a camera inside a girl's locker room. It sets a precedent that other people could abuse to a much greater extent, and she should be prosecuted. I wouldn't expect jail time here, but definitely law enforcement should get involved to make sure other people don't do this.
You know, John, I want to go back to the other point that Dan made. If this was a man, how different would this case be?
It might be, but let me ask you this, Jenna. What is the harm or injury to the victim in this case? What has actually happened where this lady deserves to have a felony conviction? I think it's just harsh. The Texas laws state that this could be filed as a civil case. I think that's where it should go. To give this lady a felony conviction, lose her job, lose her reputation, lose her status in the community, I just think is really, really harsh.
Dan, you said she wouldn't face 20 years in prison, but is a felony conviction something that you think is suitable here?
Not necessarily. There might be a lesser included misdemeanor that she could plead to, so we're not looking to ruin her life. However, you do have to set the word out in the community that you can't put a camera there. What if you were in your own workout gym and you were in the locker room and someone recorded you, but it wasn't when you're changing? You wouldn't say, well, then that's okay. You have an expectation of privacy in her locker room, and that was violated here, and that's specifically mentioned in the statute.
John, quick final thought on this?
I think if it's a public place and there are many people around, there is no expectation of privacy. If this was a one-on-one conversation between a coach and another student, then perhaps she did violate the law.
Interesting. John and Dan, I wonder if the coach has changed his technique at all based on this. That could be something interesting to follow up with. Nice to have you both today. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
News outlets are all geared up for the presidential election with comprehensive coverage as the campaign heats up. Some voters, though, may be taking a vacation from